So I just got off the wait list for The Reformatory by Tananarive Due at the library. I just got the ebook, so I'm going to start reading that today. And I kind of want to do a Black historical fiction themed reading vlog. So I'm starting that today. I'm going to start reading the book tonight, and I will keep you guys posted. So I finished part 1 of the book. It was just kind of like orienting us to the characters, and the main character, Robbie, has already been sent to the titular reformatory, which is basically a prison slash school for boys who are runaways or commit crimes, etc. And Robbie was sent there for kicking a white boy because this is Jim Crow, Florida, you know? And I wasn't expecting the point of view to be third person omniscient, but I also haven't read the synopsis in a while, so maybe that's my fault. I don't know. You know how sometimes you have a book on your TBR for so long that you forget what it's about? That's kind of that's kind of what happened with me. But yeah, I enjoyed it so far. I really enjoyed the writing. I feel like we're getting a good balance of like exposition and also like character, because between Robbie's point of view and his sister Gloria, you can kind of see how they interpret the same events differently, which I really like a lot. Hello, I made lunch, and a lot has kicked off in the book. I'm about halfway through now, and I have to speed through it because it's due at 5 p.m. and other people are waiting for it, so I can't renew it. So I'm speed reading when I get breaks from work. But yeah, further into the story now. So Robbie is in the reformatory, obviously. He's made some friends. One is Blue and one is Redbone. They get into some trouble, and Robert and Redbone are sent to the funhouse, which is basically where boys get whipped. And one thing that's crucial about Redbone is he's constantly saying, don't tell people about Blue, don't get Blue in trouble, he can't handle it. But then we get further into the story, and eventually the reformatory staff figure out that Robbie can see ghosts. And it is eventually revealed that Blue himself is a ghost. So now I'm like questioning, okay, what's the deal with Redbone? If all of these people can see Blue, like what's the situation? Is he just fooling everyone? And so now Robbie has been promised early release if he helps the reformatory catch these ghosts, so essentially get rid of them. And this is upsetting to Robbie because his mother's ghost has kind of been hovering around, keeping him safe, making him feel protected. Meanwhile, Gloria is working towards trying to get Robbie released. She went to the McCormack's house, which the McCormacks, Red and Lyle, are the ones that got Robbie sent to the reformatory, tried to talk them into getting him out, but they really didn't do anything. They just kind of insulted Gloria. Lyle made advances towards her, and all they did is just kind of reduce Robbie's severity punishment, but they didn't get him out. Separately, she connected with a lawyer from the NAACP. She asked her white employer to connect her with a law student who is actually her employer's girlfriend, and she's trying all these avenues to get Robbie out, but essentially no one can help him. And so now Robbie's in a position where he's presented with the opportunity for early release, but that puts his new friend Blue at risk, as well as, potentially his mother's ghost. So I'm gonna eat my bagel and read some more, and then I will update you once I finish the book, hopefully before 5 p.m. Also, while I'm thinking about it, there's a lot of cruelty in the book, obviously, because it's Jim Crow, Florida. But one thing that's really striking to me is how even like the villains are given kind of like humanity, but at the same time I think their benevolent moments are still kind of shown in like a sinister light, which I think is interesting. So I really enjoyed that and I found that super fascinating. Hi. Okay, it's actually been 2 days since I finished the book, and I did actually finish it. I still had the book open when it expired, so it gave me an extra hour, and that's all I needed to get to the end of the book. So we're done now. Yeah, that was simultaneously a really good, really fascinating read, and also intensely stressful, because it's like every time there was like hope for Robbie and Gloria, something awful just happened. And okay, backtracking a bit, there's an important detail that I failed to mention in like my earlier clips, and that's the fact that Robbie and Gloria's father was run out of town because he was accused of raping a white woman as a result of his activity trying to get people to unionize, essentially. And so this is like an ongoing specter hovering over the story, because the general presumption is that Robbie's being punished because of what his father did. And people threaten him, or they try to make deals with the family to treat him nicer, contingent on his father being given up, essentially, even though he didn't do anything. And so this is an ongoing challenge throughout the story. And so, like I mentioned before, Robbie is now a hate catcher for the reformatory, and this gives him popularity with the other boys, but also kind of puts him at odds with Redbone, because as I mentioned, Blue is a ghost. And basically it comes out that Blue wants revenge for what Superintendent Haddock did to him. What Superintendent Haddock is the guy who runs the reformatory. And it's very interesting because I feel like there was kind of like a flipped role situation going on, where earlier on, Boone, who is one of the black workers at the reformatory, he's kind of portrayed as this guy who is just terrorizing the kids, doesn't really care about them. But then later towards the end of the book, he's kind of shown in a more sympathetic light. You get a sense of his religion and his belief in ghosts and things like that. And on the other hand, Haddock, I feel like he was kind of intended to be portrayed as a more complex character earlier on, being somewhat nice to Robbie, etc. But I think later on, once you actually get into his head, he's kind of the like stereotypical sadistic villain, I would say. Like, it's definitely realistic for people to be sadistic and cruel towards black people and take positions where they'll have more authority over them, but at the same time it's a little funny to have the guy be like,
I just love violating children, and also I suffocated my infant sister to death and posed for her in a photo.
Like, it's a little silly, but also I kind of get where Tananarive was coming from with that. But anyway, Robbie escapes from the reformatory, he's reunited with Gloria, and they end up fleeing north to meet their father in Chicago. So the family's reunited, all is good, but like, at what cost, kind of? Like, everything was so tragic. Like, Redbone died, so many people got hurt, and there's so many people who like couldn't get saved from the reformatory. So even though they got their happy ending, it's still not really a happy ending. So that's how I feel about that. Anyway, I'm going to move on to my next book now. I was going to read The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead because that's also about a reformatory, but even though I own the book, I can't find it, so that's not happening right now. But I did check out Saint Monkey from the library, and that is a book about the Harlem Renaissance, so I'm excited to start that. Hi, I lied. I was going to start Saint Monkey, but then I saw on Instagram that Our Sister's Keeper became available on NetGalley, and I've been waiting for that book since the whole like publishing announcement came out. So now I'm reading that today, and yeah, we'll circle back to Saint Monkey later, but I already started reading Our Sister's Keeper, and basically the concept of it is there's this all-black utopia in Mississippi, and it's super peaceful, but basically all of the men's pain and unhappiness is given to the women.
and women are essentially subjugated in this town. So it's already a pretty interesting concept. It feels very Stepford Wives. I read the first 2 chapters. I think the writing is, it kind of both underdescribes and overdescribes in a way I can't really explain, but we'll see if it improves later on. Okay, I've formulated my thoughts a little bit more, and I think we're not really given enough time to sit in scenes. Like, there's a scene where Thea, who's one of the main characters, goes to a physical that is required of all new residents of this town, East Cobb. And at some point during this appointment, she's given a shot. And I feel like there wasn't a ton of detail in that scene. We didn't really get to linger in it, her discomfort, anything like that. But at the same time, I think there's so much description given to how people look and things like that, and what the scenery looks like. But I don't know. Maybe it'll get better later on, but we'll see.
Good morning. I'm about halfway through the book now, and I do generally enjoy the concept and where I think the story is building up to, but I am still struggling with the pacing a little bit. I don't want to give too many spoilers since this is an advanced reader copy and the book is not out until June 9th, and this video will probably be up before then. But basically, the book has alternating points of view, mainly between Thea, who is new to town, who's a journalist, who is adjusting to the life in this town, and there's Mara, who's one of the carriers, who are the people who take memories from men and sort of deal with the burdens of the trauma that Black men and Black women have gone through over time. Every now and then, the perspectives derail to other characters. Mostly it's Mara's perspective that's replaced with one of the other carriers, or sort of the leader of the carriers, Clotilde. And I feel like these shifts in perspective are used to provide exposition, but it's not always immediately clear how they fit into the larger narrative, and so it feels like Thea's side of the plot is progressing more than Mara's. And I will say, the first 10 or so chapters are all in one day, which would not be concerning to me if it wasn't already halfway through the book. So we'll have to see how things continue to build over time, but the pacing is still a little bit of a concern for me because I feel like some aspects of the story are not developing as fast as others. One aspect I do find interesting so far is that there seems to be a class element going on here. The book is mostly about gender and how Black women are expected to take on the burdens of Black men and sort of be their piece or whatever, but it's sort of described how their wives couldn't really handle the stress of taking on their traumas, so they ended up outsourcing it. So that's kind of an interesting angle to take on it, where people are doing this work of taking on the burdens of essentially everyone in their entire town. And also, this is a pretty wealthy town, and there's mention of servants working at these lavish parties, and I think that just really got me thinking about this world and what it takes to really have comfort, essentially, and kind of how instead of sort of coming together to address their issues, they kind of just end up pushing it off on other people. Another element I think is interesting is that this all-Black town was allowed to exist by a white man, a white doctor named Dr. Graham, who's essentially experimenting on the residents. And that's not a huge spoiler, that's in one of the very early chapters, but it's the residents are so grateful, so fawning towards him, and even Thea calls out as a bit odd. So it's just why are we so grateful to this man? He has to be getting something out of it, and what he's getting out of it is experimentation. So that's an interesting element as well. But yeah, I'm gonna keep reading. I'll probably finish it sometime today, and then I'll come back and update you guys. And that will probably be the last update for this video because this is actually a little bit longer than I originally anticipated, and we will circle back about Saint Monkey in another video.
Hey,
It's totally the same day and not multiple days later. But anyway, I finished Our Sister's Keeper. As usual, I really liked the concept. I found the characters really interesting, but I also found the book really frustrating at times, both just because of the plot and like the things that the characters were doing, but then also kind of the writing issues I mentioned previously. And so I did get this through NetGalley, so I'm going to read my NetGalley review for you all, and that will kind of like summarize my overall take on the book. 3.5 stars. I really love the premise and themes of this book, but the number of perspective switches was a significant drawback for me. Many of these chapters were clearly intended to provide characterization or relevant information for the reader, but don't have any build-up and or in some cases didn't seem directly tied to any actions by the characters. It got to the point where once I started another chapter from a new perspective, my initial reaction was I don't care, even if the chapter paid off later. I also found myself forgetting some of the characters in between chapters. The timeline of events also feels a little muddled towards the end of the book. Apart from that, I think this book calls attention to gender divides that still exist in the Black community and correctly juxtaposes them with how anti-Blackness marginalizes Black people as a whole. There are some class implications I wish had been touched on a bit more outside of the carriers, and the universe also seems to operate on the presumption that Black men were the primary victims of anti-Black violence, when women also experienced it. This is alluded to later on when Mara takes on her special assignment, but it isn't really thoroughly addressed, even in Thea's chapters when you think she would know better. The twist at the end of the book was foreshadowed for several chapters, but I still wasn't expecting it, and I was genuinely blown away by it. The main cast is really interesting, even if I would have preferred their characterization to reveal more gradually. I would probably try another book from this author. So yeah, that's that. When I say I was blown away by the twist, I mean I literally threw my phone. That's how serious it was. I think the storytelling was actually pretty strong. I think the writing and the perspective switching was the biggest drawback, but apart from that, I don't really have any issues with how the author told the story, and I think in some cases it worked. So I think I definitely would recommend this. It definitely does make you angry. There was another review on here that said they quit reading the book because they got so angry, and I understood them, because reading some of the dialogue, I was just I can't put up with these people anymore. I really can't. But I pushed through the end, and I'm glad that I did. So despite my misgivings about it, I would genuinely recommend this book. If you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me through this vlog. I really enjoyed both books that I read this time around. And now, here are 2 memes related to the books out of context. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.